I remember that day like it's still burning in my chest. The heat, the flags, the voices shouting for truth. I was there for Kash Patel, a man I believe stood against corruption when no one else would. I had followed every interview, every document drop, every claim he made. To me, he wasn't just another official. He was a warrior standing in the gap for the America I loved. I drove 9 hours across 2 states just to be part of that rally. I wore my favorite shirt, the one that said, "Truth over tyranny." I shouted until my throat went raw, my hands shaking as the crowd roared back. It felt holy almost, like we were standing for something eternal. I told myself this was what God wanted, that He was on our side. But looking back now, I realize how blind I was to what was really stirring in my heart. When the speeches ended, I sat in my truck feeling strangely empty. The chants still echoed in my mind, but there was a silence underneath them. A silence that felt like a question I couldn't answer. I started the engine thinking about how proud I was to fight for truth. But before I could even leave the parking lot, my chest tightened. It felt like my lungs forgot how to breathe. I grabbed the steering wheel, gasped for air, and then everything went black. The last thing I remember hearing was my own heartbeat fading. And then nothing. No pain, no sound, just stillness. But that stillness didn't last, because when I opened my eyes again, I was no longer in my truck. I was standing somewhere else, somewhere that didn't belong to this world. When I opened my eyes, I was standing on something that looked like glass, but it pulsed like it was alive. The air shimmered, thick with a golden radiance that seemed to hum through my bones. I couldn't tell where the floor ended or the sky began. Everything blended into one endless field of light. For a moment, I thought maybe I was dreaming, but then the air itself began to move, almost breathing, and I knew this was no dream. I had crossed over. In front of me stood what looked like a courtroom, not one made of wood or marble, but of living fire and truth. The walls weren't walls at all. They were formed by waves of energy that moved like scripture come alive. I didn't see a judge, no benches, no flags, just light. Yet I felt judgment everywhere. It wasn't cruel or harsh, it was holy. The kind of justice that doesn't shout, doesn't punish, it simply reveals. Suddenly, I wasn't just standing there. I was watching. My life began playing around me like scenes projected in midair. Every argument, every post, every time I'd shouted someone down online in the name of truth. I saw my anger, my pride, my certainty that I was right and they were wrong. I saw the faces of people I'd mocked, people I'd dismissed. My chest tightened with shame. I wanted to shout that I was doing it all for the good of the country, for truth, for Kash Patel, for God Himself. But before I could, a voice filled the chamber. It wasn't loud, but it carried through every corner of that vast place. "Ethan," it said, calm, unshaken, eternal, "you fought for men, but did you ever fight for me?" The words tore through me like light through glass. I dropped to my knees. I didn't even know how to answer. Because for the first time in my life, I realized I couldn't. I don't know how long I stayed on my knees. Time didn't move the same way there. Seconds felt like hours, and hours felt like eternity. When I finally lifted my head, something began to rise before me. A mirror made entirely of light. It floated in the air, humming softly, almost breathing. I stepped closer, and when I looked into it, I didn't see my face. I saw my heart. Every thought, every intention, every hidden motive I'd buried beneath words like justice and truth. The mirror showed me moments I'd forgotten. Arguments where I was more interested in winning than understanding. Donations I made so I could feel righteous. Posts I shared not out of love for truth, but out of hatred for those who disagreed. Each scene cut deeper than the last. It was like watching my soul being peeled open, layer by layer, until only the raw truth remained. I wanted to turn away, but I couldn't. Something inside me knew this wasn't meant to destroy me, and it was meant to free me. Still, it hurt. I had thought I was fighting evil in the world, but I had ignored the one inside myself. I had raised my voice louder than my prayers. I had followed men louder than I listened to God. Then I heard footsteps behind me, soft, steady. I turned and there he was. Kash Patel. Not the man from the rallies, not the fighter from interviews, but someone transformed, calm, radiant, almost weightless. His eyes met mine, and he smiled like an older brother who had already faced the same truth. "You fought hard, Ethan," he said. "But sometimes when we fight for light without humility, we start to become the very thing we oppose." I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to say I was loyal. But no words came. My throat tightened. Cash reached out, placing a hand on my shoulder, and the mirror behind me dissolved into dust that sparkled like stars. "The gavel doesn't belong to men," he said softly. "It never did." Those words echoed through me. And then the light began to shift again, drawing my gaze upward to something so vast, so holy, it made every courtroom on earth look like a child's drawing. I lifted my eyes and saw it. The throne. It wasn't like anything human hands could build. It wasn't gold or wood or marble. It was alive. It pulsed like a heartbeat, radiating waves of light that carried both power and peace. I could feel it inside my bones, and the authority, the truth, the mercy. Everything in that place seemed to revolve around it. And there, floating in front of the throne, was a gavel made entirely of light. It didn't need to move. Its very presence carried judgment. I fell to my knees again, trembling. My chest was tight, my hands shaking, and I said what I hadn't said in years. "Lord, forgive me." The words felt small, but they were real. For the first time, I wasn't speaking to win an argument or prove a point. I was speaking from a place of surrender. Then I heard the voice again, calm, steady, infinite. "Ethan," it said, "you thought the world's battles were fought with noise and power. But truth isn't shouted, it's lived. The gavel was never in their hands, it was always in mine." The light around me began to pulse faster. The gavel struck once, just once, and everything trembled. I felt it move through me like a wave of fire and water mixed together, washing away the anger, the fear, the pride. It wasn't punishment, it was purification. Every false motive burned away until I felt weightless. I looked to Cash. He was standing beside me, smiling with tears in his eyes. "Now you understand," he said. "The real courtroom isn't in Washington. It's in the heart. And the judge isn't a man. It's the one who made men." I couldn't speak. I just nodded. For the first time in my life, I felt what truth actually was. Not a weapon, not a cause, but a person. The one before me. The one holding the gavel. And as the light began to swallow everything, I heard the voice once more. Closer this time, almost like it was inside me. "Go back, Ethan. Speak truth, but this time, speak it with love." Then, darkness again. But this time, it wasn't fear. It was peace. When I woke up, I thought I was still in that light. My chest was burning, my throat dry, and I could hear someone shouting, "We've got a pulse!" Then the sound of machines, the sting of oxygen in my nose. I blinked and saw a paramedic leaning over me, sweat on his forehead. I was back. Back in the world I thought I'd left for good. I tried to speak, but all that came out was a whisper. "The gavel?" The paramedic frowned, confused. "Don't talk, sir. You're safe." But I wasn't thinking about safety. I was thinking about what I'd seen. That courtroom, that voice. That gavel of light that ruled not through fear, but through love and truth so pure it made my soul ache. The next few hours were a blur. Sirens, hospital lights, forms, IV drips. But none of it felt real. What felt real was the memory of that voice saying, "Go back and speak truth with love." Those words kept replaying in my head like a command I couldn't ignore. When my family came to see me, they cried with relief. I tried to smile, but something in me had shifted. I wasn't the same man they had known. The one who spent nights arguing online, consumed by rage over who was right or wrong. All that noise felt so small now, I realized the world didn't need another loud voice shouting for truth. It needed hearts softened by it. I looked out the hospital window that night and whispered a prayer I hadn't said in years. God, I still believe in justice, but now I know who holds it. When I got home, everything felt smaller. The flags, the posters, the news channels I once couldn't live without, all of it looked like pieces of a game I no longer wanted to play. My phone was full of messages from people who had heard about my collapse at the rally. "Glad you're okay, brother," one said. "You're a fighter." Another read, "We need you back out there, Ethan. The truth movement isn't the same without you." But I couldn't reply. I didn't know how to tell them what had really happened. How could I explain that I had stood before something so much greater than politics, greater than ideology, greater than Kash himself? I opened my laptop, scrolled through my old posts, and it hit me. Almost every word I'd written had come from anger, not love. Every truth I'd shared was sharpened like a weapon, meant to wound, not heal. That night, I deleted all of it. Every post, every video, every rant. My hands shook as I hit confirm. It felt like erasing a part of myself, but deep down, I knew it wasn't deletion. It was deliverance. I wasn't betraying what I stood for. I was finally understanding it. Truth without love isn't truth. It's judgment wearing a disguise. For weeks, I stayed quiet. I prayed more than I talked. I read the Bible not as a rule book, but as a letter from someone who still believed in me. I stopped trying to save the world and started asking God to save me. Then one night, I dreamed again of that courtroom. The light was softer this time. The gavel didn't strike. Instead, the voice said, "You've seen who holds it. Now show them what mercy looks like." I woke up crying. I knew what I had to do. I had to speak again. But this time, not as a soldier of outrage, as a witness of grace. The first time I spoke publicly about what happened, I didn't plan it. A friend from church asked if I'd share my miracle story at a small gathering. I said yes, thinking maybe a dozen people would show up. Instead, the room filled, not just with believers, but skeptics, reporters, and a few faces I recognized from my old rallies. They came expecting a political story, something about divine justice or patriots in heaven. But what I gave them wasn't what they wanted to hear. I told them everything. The light, the courtroom, the voice, the gavel. I told them how I saw my pride, my hate, my blindness. How I realized I'd been worshiping movements instead of the maker. The room fell silent. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, I said they understood. But as soon as I finished, the murmurs began. "Sounds like he's gone soft. He's been compromised. Fake testimony for clicks. God wouldn't talk like that." By the next day, my inbox was filled with messages. Some called me a prophet. Others called me a traitor. A few of the people I once stood beside turned their backs completely. The same crowd that once called me brother now called me deceiver. It hurt more than I expected. But deep inside, I felt peace. Because I knew what I saw. I knew who I heard. And I wasn't about to trade that truth for approval again. Kash Patel himself reached out. Not in public, but privately. His message was simple. "Brother, the light doesn't make sense to those still living in the dark. Stay steady." I stared at that message for a long time. Not as a fanboy this time, but as a man who understood. Kash wasn't my hero anymore. He was my brother. We were both under the same gavel, both accountable to the same judge. That night I prayed again. "Lord, give me the courage to speak when the world mocks me, and the humility to stay silent when it's you who must speak instead." It's been a year since I died. A full year since the day I left that rally and crossed into the place beyond light. Life since then hasn't been easy. Some of my old friends don't call anymore. My name isn't passed around in the same groups that once praised me. I've lost followers, attention, and influence. But I've gained something I never had before. Peace. Every morning now, I sit on my porch with a Bible in one hand and coffee in the other. The world still spins with noise. Politicians yelling, people dividing, truth twisted into weapons. But I don't feel the need to fight like I used to. Not because I've stopped caring, but because I've finally seen who the real judge is. The gavel I once thought belonged to men, to movements, to leaders, to the righteous side, was never theirs to hold. It belongs to the one whose justice is mercy, whose verdict is truth spoken in love. Sometimes I still see that courtroom in my dreams. The throne of light, the gavel that glows like the sun, the voice that called my name with power and tenderness all at once. I wake up weeping, not from fear but from longing, because I know that one day I'll stand there again, not to be judged this time but to finally go home. I still support those who fight for good, for freedom, for truth, but I do it differently now. I pray for them, not praise them. I ask that God leads them, not that they lead me, because the world doesn't need more men shouting their version of justice. It needs more hearts humbled before the real gavel. So if you're hearing this, if you've ever raised your voice for truth, I get it. I was you. But remember this: shouting won't shake heaven, and power won't move eternity. Only love will, and the moment you see who truly holds the gavel, you'll stop fighting for truth and start living it. Because I saw him, and he wasn't holding a weapon, he was holding me.